Welcome back, Kia owners. And for those of you that have never been here before, welcome to my channel. While we have a moment here, don't forget to check out my other Kia DIY repair videos. Just click above on the right hand corner, it'll take you there. But before we get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell. Believe it or not, this really helps me to continue making these videos. Okay, so you could be getting ready for work in the morning, or be at the store, or maybe even be at home, and you go and start up your Kia, and this is what happens. Yeah, looks like you have an electrical issue. And if you're like me, fixing your own cars, electrical issues or electrical breakdowns suck, because it can be anything. So let's diagnose and do a couple of tests on the Kia and see what's going on. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your voltmeter. I got this one at Harbor Freight years ago for about, I don't know, 25 bucks or so. We're going to check the voltage on the battery to make sure it's charged. You're going to move the scale here to 20, and then go ahead and connect the probes, one to positive, one to negative, and let's see what it reads. It needs to be over 12 volts. Yep, we're over 12 volts, so the battery's good and charged. If the battery was below 12 volts, put a charge on it. Once you have it fully charged, go ahead and see if it starts. If it starts, you're good to go. If not, move on to the next step. The next thing we want to do is check out the battery terminals. Make sure they're not loose. If they're not loose, then take a 10mm socket and remove the terminals and inspect them. If they need to be cleaned, get a little sandpaper and clean the posts and clean the terminals and put it back together. Once you've inspected and cleaned the terminals, install the terminals back onto the battery. Go ahead and go in your car and see if it starts. If you're still having the same problem, move on to the next step. Okay, this next step is a simple step. What you're going to do is you're going to go in the car and turn your headlights on. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go outside and look at the headlights. See if you notice that the lights, when they come on, they look normal. This is telling you that everything in the circuitry in the car is okay. If your lights are looking dim, you may want to go back and make sure the terminals are installed correctly onto the battery. Make sure they're nice and tight. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check and see if your starter relay is working correctly. And where it's located is right here in this box. You're going to press on these two tabs here. Press in on each side at the same time and just lift up. You can see what you need to do when you press on the tab. Now what you're going to do is you're going to locate your starter relay. It's right here. And on the other side is your AC relay. These two relays are the same. What you're going to do is you're going to exchange these two relays and you're going to plug them in. You're just going to swap them out. Once you've done that, go in your car and see if it starts. If it starts, just go to your parts store and buy a relay and replace it. But if it doesn't start, well, that's telling me we have a bad starter, and we're going to have to remove it and replace it with a new one. Okay, so if you're like me, now you're faced in having to buy a starter. Now, if you got some time and you can order it online, you're probably going to save 50% on the price. But if you're like me and you need to keep this car running and you need to fix this ASAP, I wound up spending $190 for this starter. So if you want, shop around. If not, you're going to probably pay double the price. The next thing you're going to want to know is, where is the starter located? Okay, before we get into the engine, the starter is in a real tight place. So it's better for me to show you a engineered drawing, what you're going to be faced with. As you can see in this drawing, here's the Kia engine. And if you can see the red arrow, it's pointing towards the front of the car or towards the radiator. And the letter A is the starter. You can also see the 14mm bolts that hold it in. That's the only thing that's holding the starter into the engine. And of course, you've got a screw and some wiring in the back of the starter. Okay, in this next drawing, pretend you're the radiator looking at the engine. You can see the starter and you can see the two wires that are attached to the starter, wire A and wire B. Wire A, or plug A, just gets unplugged. So you just have to push a tab and unplug it from the starter. Wire B is bolted on, so you have to unscrew that. You need to remove these two items, otherwise it'll be very, very difficult for you to remove the starter. The other two things that you need to be cognizant of, if you look on the upper right-hand corner where the red arrow's at, this harness is clipped on right on the starter. Now you can fiddle with it and try to unsnap that plastic clamp, but what I chose to do was just to cut it and then I would zip tie it later. The other thing you're going to need to unplug, and I'm not too sure if it's on this picture, here I'll point it out on my video. You'll need to unplug the plug that goes to your oil filter. You'll need to remove that. Once you have everything removed, you can then unbolt the two 14mm bolts and the starter can be removed. Once you've done that, the starter can be removed. Okay, the first thing you want to do is you want to pop your hood, or you can leave your hood down either way, but you want to set your ramps in front of your front tires and you want to roll up on the ramp so you can get ready to work underneath. I find this a lot easier than jacking your car up and putting jack stands on, and it's a lot faster. Of course my car didn't start, so I had to have a couple of friends push my car up on the ramps. Now that we have that done, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is disconnect the negative side of the battery. Just remove the cable and set it aside. Now we're going to take off this black box here. This is where our air filter's in. To the left side here we've got two 10mm screws we're going to unscrew. One is for this air duct tube, and on the bottom here there's a 10mm screw that we're going to have to remove so we can start to take our box out. Okay, what I have here is a 3/8 ratchet, a 3/8 extension, and a 10mm socket. Like I said, doing this job requires very, very little tools. Okay, let's loosen up this screw so we can take this air intake hose out of the way. Okay, let's pull it apart. And now let's go to the bottom and take out that 10mm bolt. Okay, as you can see here, I removed that bolt. Now we're going to go on the other side of this box and unsnap two latches. You could do this with your fingers. There's one here. And there's one here. You can see how I unsnap them. Once you have them unsnapped, go ahead and pull up on the box to remove it. Once you've removed it, you can see the air filter. Looks clean on this side, but it looks like it's a little dirty on the other side with all the leaves and stuff. It still looks pretty good. All I need is to put some air to it and blow it out to clean it. Next, we're going to remove this small hose. We'll just need to get some pliers here and just move this clamp back and just pull on the hose. Now, don't get crazy pulling out this hose because the nipple that comes out is plastic. You don't want to break that, so be careful. Once you have that removed, on the bottom of that big hose is a big clamp. Go ahead and take your Phillips screwdriver and unscrew it. Once you have the clamp loose, go ahead and remove this hose. Just twist it off. Okay, now we're going to take the bottom part of that box out. Here's a 10mm screw you're going to have to remove. For me, removing this one, the screw was a little tight, so I had to put a little more muscle into it. But it comes out. Okay, in order for us to remove that box, we're going to have to remove this other box first. We're going to have to remove these two plastic clips. Now, don't get intimidated by these. These are really easy to take out. All you need is a small flat screwdriver. You're going to push up that center piece and pull it out. Once you have it out, then you can remove the bottom plastic piece as shown. Now that we've removed the two clips, we can pull this box up and out of the way. Now that we have that out of the way, we can remove the other box that's on the bottom there, as shown. Here I'm just showing you what that bottom box looks like, where all the snaps are in the 10mm hole where the bolt goes in. Make sure you dust this and clean it really good so when you put it back it's all nice and clean. So as you can see, you can't see anything because they have this plastic protective cover underneath. It's here to protect the bottom part of the engine in case a rock kicks up. This is what it looks like when you remove it. But don't get intimidated, this is really easy to remove. Here's a drawing so you can easily visualize what you're going to do. As you can see, I've put red and green arrows here. The red arrows are plastic clips like you removed up on top, remember? It's kind of the same thing. The green arrows are 10mm screws. So you have 4 plastic clips in the front. You're going to remove those first. And you have 6 10mm screws that you're going to remove. Once you have it removed, it comes right out. It's really easy. Here's mine removed. It looks pretty beat up. You can pick these things up for anywhere from 15 to 50 bucks, depending where you go. I may think about getting another one. Okay, now we've got everything removed so we can get into the starter and remove it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to unplug the plug that's on the starter, right where the red arrow's at. Just press the tab and pull out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the bolt where the red arrow's at. Once we have those two items removed, we can move on to the next step. Okay, now that you're on your back looking up into the starter, you can see I unplugged the plug that was in the starter. You can see my fingers pointing to a nut. That nut you're not going to remove. The nut you're going to remove is behind that black plug. You can't see it. You're going to have to put your hand in there and feel it. There's a rubber boot covering it, so you're going to have to remove the rubber boot. Take your 12mm socket and remove it. Just like I was showing you earlier, remove the plug from the oil filter. Okay, the last thing you're going to do is you're going to cut the harness. Where the red arrow's at is a plastic clamp. Like I said earlier, you can try to finger your way in there to see if you can unsnap it, but what I chose to do is just cut it and I'll zip tie it later. This is connected to a bracket that's right on the starter. Just cut it and move the harness aside. Once you've done that, the last thing we need to do is remove the 2 bolts. The next shot I'm going to show you is the bottom bolt, as shown in this drawing here. So let's take a look where it's at as you're laying on the ground looking up. Okay, as you move to the right a little bit, you'll see where that bottom 14mm bolt is at. There it is right there. Just take your 14mm socket, get up in there, and remove it. Okay, now I'm going to show you where that top bolt is at. As you can see in this drawing where the red arrow's at. Again, just get in there with your 14 millimeter socket. I'm using a universal socket and a extension so I can get in there a little easier. Just get in there and remove the bolt. Once you have the bolt removed, you can go in underneath and remove the starter. Just wiggle it out and the starter will come right out. Okay, now we got the old starter out. Here's the new one. Make sure you read all the instructions. And here's the part number if you want. As you can tell, I'm a speed reader. And of course, if you have any problems, here's the 800 number that you call and they never pick up the phone. So let's get this baby installed. Okay, once you position the starter in there to where it belongs, before you put your bolts in, I would put some anti-seize lubricant on it. If you ever have to take it apart in the future, it'll be a lot easier. The other thing too, what I would do is before you put your connectors back in, is I would spray some electronic contact cleaner. It's just good insurance just to make sure all the connections are clean. What I did is I put the bottom bolt in first, got in there and got it snug. I didn't tighten it up. It was still slightly loose. And then I went on top and put the top bolt on and tightened it down with the 14 millimeter socket. You're going to need 37 to approximately 47 torque pounds of torque. That's what the factory wants you to do. And then just plug everything back in. Once you have everything installed, go ahead and reinstall everything else. And the last thing you want to do is connect your battery and start your car. Awesome. Other than the fact I was laying on my back on the ground, it was a pretty easy repair. So if I can do it, trust me, you can do it. You just saved yourself between $450 and $650 depending where you go on this repair. Okay, well I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it was very informative. Please check out my other how-to videos. Oh, and check out my new website. There's new items being put in there every day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, hit the bell. Until then, we'll see you at my next video. Bye!